Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana. And we're here today with special guest, Meredith Heller, who's here to share with us her new book, Writing by Heart, A Poetry Path to Healing and Self-Discovery. Are you looking for encouragement to dive into those really tough feelings and yet come out on the other side feeling refreshed? Well, today's guest is going to share with us how to do just that. So Meredith Heller is a poet, songwriter, avid nature lover, and educator with degrees in writing and education. She leads writing workshops online and in person at schools, juvenile detention centers, women's prisons, and wellness retreats. So let's welcome to the show, Meredith Heller.
Thank you so much for having me.
What an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this new book. What inspired you to write this?
Well, I have been writing poetry since I was a teen. I left home very young at 12, 13 years old and raised myself, living out in the woods along the Potomac River outside of Washington, D.C., where I grew up. And writing poetry and songs are really what saved my life during a very traumatic, difficult, lonely time in my life. And so my first book, Write a Poem, Save Your Life, tells the story about how poetry writing saved my life and led me to work with teens doing poetry in the schools for 30 years. After that, I started working doing poetry writing with women. And this new book, Writing by Heart, came out of the last few years since the pandemic, making community when we were all in quarantine, and then having this very strong hearth of women warrior poets. And this book came out of these workshops.
So when we look at writing by heart, what does that mean?
Well, writing by heart, I've always loved the concept of doing something by heart. When we do something by heart, we know it in our bones and our blood. It becomes a trusted friend. And that's what I'm hoping for everybody who uses this book, Writing by Heart, or who comes to my workshops, is that writing becomes a place of trust and a friendship with yourself and your creativity and your muse, and that it becomes a refuge and a place of honesty and a place where you deepen into who you really are, bringing your purpose and your passion to the world.
Your subtitle, A Poetry Path to Healing and Self-Discovery, has me really thinking like, how can poetry bring us to these places?
Yeah, it's such a good question. Thank you. You know, Um, writing, when we write for ourselves, the way we do with this book or in my workshops, we're not writing for anybody outside ourselves. We're not writing to get anywhere or to impress anyone. We're really writing in a self-reflective way to understand ourselves more deeply, to touch our truth. So a lot of us start with our writing being the first place where we can be absolutely honest, knowing that if you don't want someone else to read that, you can burn it, you can rip it up. And so we begin to be able to voice what's truly happening for us, how we feel, all of us. Every part of us is welcome, from the sadness and the grieving and the loss and the hot mess and the confusion to the joy and the passion and the longing, and making room for all of ourselves and to express ourselves in this way makes us whole, and this heals us.
So when we look at this type of healing, what is it like for people? Because I know a lot of times people are expecting like instructions. How do they open themselves up to healing with poetry?
Mm. Well, it happens in the writing itself, and the book is full of writing invitations that are doorways, and all you have to do is start. I say your pen is the key, your paper is the door. Put your pen to paper and open the door. Just start writing. It is a relationship of trust with yourself, showing up. What's bubbling up here in my belly, in my heart, right here, right now? And how can I give what I'm feeling, what I'm going through? How can I give it my attention with curiosity and kindness? And see what I dig up, see what I discover, and learn about myself. And when we learn something through our writing that we didn't necessarily know that we knew, this is when our writing really becomes alive. And this is what brings us back to the writing process again and again.
So, do you feel like most people need permission to start this process, that maybe that's like a hang up for them?
I love that question. Yes, and there's actually a whole section in the book called permission, and it's what can we give permission to in ourselves and in everything in our lives. And so, yes, this is absolutely included in that list of what we need to give ourselves permission for. Um, I do. I think that we need to ask ourselves for permission and give ourselves permission to really slow down and feel what we feel and be present with what we're going through and know that we matter enough to really dive in deep to what's going on with us. And writing is such a great mirror because it all comes out. I always say the poem knows the poem. Once you start writing, you are engaged in this deeper creative flow. And it's wild what comes out. I mean, we touch into deep psyche and the metaphors come, and then you read through it after you've written and you think, wow, this is such a great reflection of really where I am. And just that one degree of separation from self to seeing it on paper helps us have more clarity and understanding and helps us to make meaning of what's happening in our lives and gives us choice. Where do I want to point the compass of my heart now? So it helps us to see ourselves and get clear about who we are. And I think the permission is I choose that I matter and I want to know myself more deeply.
So, how do people find a way to cultivate a writing practice, especially when our lives are so busy?
Yeah, it's really a good question. I often start people with making two kinds of lists, either a gratitude list or a spark list. So, a gratitude list is from the very smallest things in your day to the very biggest things in your day that you're grateful for. And this really rewires our brains and our hearts to appreciate the things in our life that are working rather than always picking at what doesn't work. And you can do a gratitude list for literally 5 minutes while you're having breakfast or before you go to sleep. And it really is an incredible way to be in communion with yourself and your life. So, gratitude list is a great way to start, and you could always build out into a bigger piece of writing from that. The other thing I like to suggest is a spark list. And these are another thing you could do in 5 minutes during lunch, before you go to sleep, when you wake up in the morning. What are 3 to 5 things, or even 1 to 3 things, that sparked my inspiration, moved me emotionally, caught my senses, whether it was the sunshine on your skin, or a sparkle of light as you took a walk, or a cat walking down the street with you, to um, anything from the smallest to the biggest things that spark you in some way, that move you in some way. And these are great ways to start that are not overwhelming or intimidating for people. And the other thing that I want to say is about this kind of writing that you'll do with this book, Writing by Heart, or if you come to workshop, is that I'm really using poetry as an umbrella term now to encompass and hold personal, self reflective, expressive writing. And all forms of writing are welcome along with the book and in workshop. People are writing poetry, prose, story, heart spill, mind spill, song lyrics, make up your own form, just write. That's the big thing. Just write, just do it. It becomes a refuge and a friend.
Do you ever have people that tell you, well, I'm not a writer and I don't even know where to begin?
Yeah, definitely. I do. And I did a great thing that in one workshop. There was a woman who came and she was very, she got frustrated with herself and a little weepy and said, when it was time to share her piece, she just said, I'm not a poet. I can't do this. And I started taking notes on what she was saying. And after she finished her kind of mini rant, which I completely understood and held space for, and it was actually very liberating for other people to hear it as well. I wrote down all the little things she was saying, and then I read it back to her as if it were a poem. And so it was like, I'm not a poet. I don't know how to find words that express what I'm feeling. I can't do this. I'm going to go out of this class and pick up my paintbrush. And it turned into this gorgeous poem. So I would say stick with it. Whatever bubbles up in you, write that down and just say yes to yourself. Say yes to your creativity. Say yes to what's bubbling up in you. And when we say yes, we learn how to make more room for ourselves in our own lives.
How did that person take hearing that poem? I'm sure she was just, overwhelmed in a good way.
She was overwhelmed in a good way. She loved it. She still writes to me once in a while and talks about that when we did that. Yeah. And she's gone on to write wonderful poems.
Wow. What an empowering
She
path.
has poems in the new book. Yeah.
That is so empowering. You just
Yeah,
gotta love that,
I
having
know.
that kind of impact, there's that impact on other people.
Oh, it's so amazing to watch what happens with people, how people, first I worked with kids in the schools for 30 years and helping those kids to find the words to write poems and express what matters to them, and then stand up in front of a classroom of their peers with their hands and their voices shaking, and then get celebrated and cheered for their poem. And they sit down, and it is if they have grown wings, the shift in them, the way they begin to believe in themselves. And I see the same thing with the people who come to my workshops. Quiet, timid, shaking voices, people who can barely read their piece, and they come to a few workshops and they are sitting in the center of their beings, owning and claiming all of themselves, the wounding that makes them deep and sensitive, the resilience that makes them strong, the vision of who they want to be in this life and how they want to live. And that all comes through the writing because we dig deep and we always share our pieces. And I think there's an element also in the sharing of our pieces that we write of being witnessed. And there is a healing that happens when we take the parts that we tend to hide or hold back, and we bring those parts out and be willing to have them witnessed by other people. There's a healing that happens in two ways. One, we see our commonality with other people. We learn I am not alone. And then the other thing that happens is we see our unique journey and how who we are as a unique person in this world matters our voice matters. So what are we contributing? What are we offering from our own unique experience?
Well, on that note, we're going to pause here for a quick break. We've been speaking with Meredith Heller in regards to her new book, Writing by Heart, A Poetry Path to Healing and Self-Discovery. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. We'll be right back after these messages from our sponsors.
Are you an author, speaker, or expert who is looking for more publicity? Visit radioguestlist.com and sign up for free interview requests from shows looking for guests. Radio Guest List is the #1 free booking resource for radio, podcasts, and TV talk shows who are looking for experts like you right now. Visit radioguestlist.com and sign up today to get the visibility you deserve.
There comes a moment when you realize you're somewhere special. When you discover that each beautiful creature that you see has been rescued from a life of absolute horror and brought to this incredibly free place. Here's where their lives were forever changed and where yours will as well. Discover over 500 tigers, bears, and lions at the brand new visitor center at the Wild Animal Sanctuary just outside Denver. For more information, visit wildanimalsanctuary.org. Discover true freedom at the Wild Animal Sanctuary.
It's one thing to become attached to your perfect home, but what do you do when that home becomes attached to you? A family in dire need of a fresh start, a mysterious house tied to the past. Buried deep within the foundation of the old Far Hill Manor lies a centuries-old secret. Dark forces or something stronger just waiting to be discovered. Caretaker, a supernatural thriller by breakout authors R.J. Halpert.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge. Teaching beyond conventional wisdom, her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com.
I'd like to thank Jason Eastwood at Guitarfulness for sharing his inspiring music and talent with us. His music is known worldwide for cultivating atmospheres of harmony, inner peace, and clarity. Visit Jason's website at guitarfulness.com. Join his newsletter, be part of his community, and download his music. Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. We're here today with special guest Meredith Heller, who's sharing with us her new book, Writing by Heart, A Poetry Path to Healing and Self-Discovery. What if someone has a very difficult time writing about a very painful or hurtful experience? How do they work through that?
Yes. Well, what I always say is do the writing and be aware that you will probably stir things up. So great to have a therapist you trust, who you can work with. Maybe you bring that piece to or talk about what came up in terms of those feelings as you were writing. A lot of people cry when they share their piece in workshop, and I always say tears are welcome, always. I'm fluent in tears, but I'm not a therapist. So make sure you have somebody that you trust who's trained and qualified to help you work through trauma and hurt and sorrow and loss that may come up when you dig deep. I think it's a gift when these things come up. The difficult feelings, they come up to be healed. I truly believe this. And we heal them by giving them our attention. So the writing is how we give our attention to what's deep inside of us.
I really like how in your book it's a quote here. It says, writing is about building a friendship with yourself. And that really stuck with me because I think a lot of times people have even a hard time liking themselves.
Oh, I really agree, Marianne. It's a horrible thing in our culture and our society that we are so hard on ourselves and we judge ourselves and condemn ourselves. And I think that's the other thing that happens in writing is that we build this relationship of kindness and welcoming and curiosity with ourselves. And I look forward to it. I look forward to sitting down with my journal and thinking, I wonder what part of myself I'm going to speak with today as I start writing, or what part of myself has something it wants me to know as I start writing. And it is this depth of communion and friendship that is sacred that happens when we really sit down and give ourselves this writing time. And my hope is that the writing process helps people to fall in love with themselves and their lives.
What can a regular writing practice do for us?
It can really give us an opportunity to sort through the things that are going on in our lives that are often overwhelming and chaotic, and we're all going at such a crazy pace these days. It allows us to slow down, get present with ourselves, give our attention to what is bubbling up in us, whether it's something that we're moved deeply by or something that's bothering us. And as we begin to name those feelings that we're going through, it brings clarity and a sense of organization and the self expression. A place to say what you need to say, a place to voice it is so empowering and so cleansing and cathartic. So I think having a writing practice, cultivating a writing practice, is about showing up and being truthful with ourselves and giving ourselves our curiosity and loving kindness, the way we would tend a garden. We are our own garden. We've got to give ourselves sun and water. We have to digest life's experience. We've got to turn the compost of the past and plant new seeds for the future. And we do all of this through the transformative healing process of poetic, expressive, self-reflective writing.
So, how do we work through a writer's block when we get those?
Yes. First thing to know is it feels terrible. Most of us judge ourselves horribly when we're not producing, or we can't get into the flow, or we haven't written anything we like in a while. And it happens to all of us. So I always say the first thing is switch your environment. If you live out in the country, go to a city, go somewhere populated. That's going to give you a different kind of stimulation. If you live in a city, go out in nature. So switch your environment, because that will totally change the imagery and what is informing your writing. That's number one. For me, I always need to move my body. Like, a lot of times, my brain doesn't work until I move my body. I can sit down for 2 hours and not have a single idea about what to write. And the minute I get out the door to go for a walk, I'm talking 10 minutes, 10 steps into my walk. And the words start coming. The idea for the workshop starts coming. I know how I want to shift that piece in my writing. So move your body. Or the opposite, if you're constantly in motion, try sitting still. So that's the main thing, I think, is know that it's probably going to happen a few times in your life. Make room for it. All cycles have fallow and fruitful times, dark and light. Make room for the whole cycle. We don't have a lot of room in this culture and this society for the dark cycle, the fallow, but it's necessary to the production. So allow for the fallow, change your environment, shift what you do. If you sit a lot, get up and move. If you move all the time, sit down and be patient with yourself and know that even when it looks and feels like nothing is happening, just like seeds in the dark earth, things are germinating. Give them time to grow.
In your book, you talk about body language. How does that fit into all of this?
Oh, thank you. Well, I was a body worker, a massage therapist specializing in spinal cord injury rehabilitation for 27 years. That was my livelihood. And one thing I really learned is that bodies tell the stories. They hold and keep the stories. And if we give our bodies the opportunity, they will teach us their language, their wisdom, and the medicine they need to heal. So the body language section in this book is probably the longest chapter. And we go through different areas of our bodies, giving them a chance to speak and to tell their stories, from joy and liberation to wounding and squashing and pain and everything in between. And there are some really fun sections in the body language chapter and some very deep sections for your to dig deep and find what lives in the places we don't usually visit.
Do people tend to hold like anxiety and other emotions within the body that they can work through with this process?
Absolutely. Yes, definitely. I think that is really a big part of it. If there's an area that you've had chronic pain in, or wounding, or disease, or surgeries, or anything like that, we always tend to push away what hurts and to protect ourselves and to block it out. And so by writing about these parts, we invite these parts of ourselves that we normally push away, we invite them back into our heart, back into the hearth of our bodies, and give them our attention and sit beside them and say, tell me, just like we would with a child, tell me what hurts. Or tell me what makes you feel joyous, what makes you want to dance, right? So we might write about our feet. We might write about our knees, our bellies, our hands, starting with something not so vulnerable, like the hands, which are incredible creatures unto themselves, and then slowly moving into more vulnerable areas like the belly or the hips or the lower back or an area of pain or wounding.
As you've worked through the different workshops that you provide for your students, what tends to be one of the places people get stuck?
What a great question. It's interesting. We did a workshop called Desire, which I believe is chapter 9 in the book. And my invitation was to tune in to desire, your desire, as if it is your heart's compass, pointing you in the direction of what you most love in this life, what most fully enlivens you. And people were really having a hard time giving themselves permission for their desire. There was pain and shame and blame all around desire. So I ended up thinking, what if our heart's desire could be as natural as knowing the colors we love, right? This color energizes me. That color makes me feel calm. I love this color. I can't stand that color. What if it were that natural? So I created a section within the desire chapter called Color Crazy. And we all wrote about color and how you just know you gravitate to the colors you like. And so I think that was what was tricky for people, giving themselves permission for what truly makes them happy, for what truly makes them fulfilled, for what really revitalizes their passion and their purpose, and really giving that to themselves.
In your book, you talk about elements. Why is that an important piece?
Yeah, I love this chapter. The book starts with elemental wisdom. And this was the first women's workshop that I put together when we were in the middle of the pandemic and in order to create community. And so we called on the power of the elements, earth, air, fire, and water, to fuel our lives when we were all so lonely and isolated in quarantine during the pandemic, to fuel our lives, bind us together as a group, bind us and bond us back to the natural world, and to energize our writing. And we do all kinds of fun things in that elemental wisdom chapter. We become the elements, and we write about the element as if we are the element. And it's just so fun. The poems that come out of those are just fantastic. The example poems in that section was one of my favorites.
So you talk about inner wildness. What is that and why is that important?
Yes, thank you. I think so many of us these days are getting to a point on our path of becoming where we realize we got conditioned by a lot of should be's. I should be this way. I should do this. I should act in this way, talk in this way, move in this way, love this person, whatever. A lot of shoulds were put on us before we really had a choice, our conditioning. And the inner wildness I'm talking about is tuning into who am I really? Who are you really? What really moves me? What am I really curious about in this lifetime? How do I really feel about this? How do I want to express myself in ways that feed me on a soul level? And from being fed on a soul level by my innate way of being, which oftentimes is different than how I was conditioned. Once my soul feels fed, then I've got something to offer to the world.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. It's
Mm.
just so impactful. And I love how in your book you've got sections that talk about body and mindfulness, and you go into this practice. And I love how that's with each section that you have.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's my own special thing. So within each chapter, there's all different sections. There's 5 different sections. And then within each section is a subsection called body mindfulness. And this is a guided meditation or journey that helps you to access your thoughts, your feelings, your memories, physical sensations, connection to deep psyche that is going to inform your writing. And one of my favorite kinds of journeys to do is to journey to find an animal ally to help with healing or to help with navigating life's changes and challenges. And so we did a workshop called Metamorphosis, which is chapter 14, the last chapter of the book, where we followed the metamorphosis that a butterfly goes through from pupa to caterpillar to chrysalis to winged one to full adult butterfly. And we wrote about each stage as though we were going through this stage so we could track our own cycles of becoming and transformation. And it is glorious. And the poems that came from the women in this workshop, the example poems in the book, are so beautiful. They just sing with beauty and letting go and change and transformation. It's one of my favorite workshops I ever did.
I know that we've discussed some of the different workshops that you have. I'd love for you to share those with us.
So each chapter in this book comes from the workshops that I had done. At that point, through the writing of this book, I've done a lot more since then. But so each chapter is a workshop. So we've got elemental wisdom and body language, like we talked about, sensorium, where you explore your senses, wild heart, sanctuary, belonging, fertile darkness, which I was touching on before in terms of a fallow cycle, and really giving that to ourselves as part of the wholeness of our cycles. Desire, which we talked about. Chapter 10 is bloom. Explore your life cycles from seed to bloom and back again. Zen bones, where we learn to boil our poems all the way down to the essence. Heartbeat, where we actually attune through our hand, palpating our actual heart, and open a line of communication with our physical organ heart to inform our writing. Moon dance, where we follow the lunar phases to inhabit our cycles, our shadow, and our shine. And lastly, metamorphosis, embody the poetry of change. And so these workshops I teach ongoing through the whole year. They meet once a week on Zoom for a series of 5 weeks, a 5-week series. Then we take 2 weeks off, give people a breather, give me a chance to create the next workshop, and we roll this way through the whole year, including the summer. And when I started the women's workshops in October of 2020, I had 8 women, and for that elemental wisdom workshop. And when that workshop was over, they asked for another one, and they came back and brought their friends from all over the country. And so we have now outgrown our original 2 and then 3 flower pots cohorts, and we now have 5 cohorts, and we're growing. The beauty of Zoom is that we have women from all over the country and a few women from around the world. We have women who get up at 1 a.m. and Zoom with us from Egypt and Croatia. We have women in Alaska and England and Nova Scotia and the Netherlands and New Zealand and all across the United States. And we are growing. And it is an incredible community of women warrior poets. They show up beautiful and brave and vulnerable and courageous. And they dig deep in their writing to find their treasures that help to revitalize their lives, their passion, their purpose.
Well, Meredith, I have found your work to be so empowering. I wanted to thank you for being here with us today and sharing your wisdom and insight. Where can our listeners and our readers go to learn more about your work and, of course, your workshops?
Thank you. My website, meredithheller.com. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, and my book is available everywhere books are to be found from your favorite bookseller. It just came out and it's flying off the shelves. And my hope is it gets into the hands and hearts of everyone who will benefit from the healing and transformative power of poetry writing.
Well, Meredith, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
I had such a wonderful time talking with you, Marianne. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Meredith. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, Writing by Heart, A Poetry Path to Healing and Self-Discovery. Writing by Heart's available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. And remember, support our indie bookstores. If they don't have it on the shelf, just ask for them to order it. You can order this book directly from the publisher, New World Library, at newworldlibrary.com. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.